Schools and universities are starting to open now after the lockdown, but not everyone wants to go back. The previous year showed us that there are alternative ways for children to study, and it turns out that many students have succeeded in online courses just as well as they were doing offline. If you want to know how, our next session is all about that.
Welcome everybody to our session on distance learning. I like it, I want more. As we just heard, the past year has seen an unwanted experiment in education. 1.5 billion children were out of school at one point. But it's also been an experiment that has taught us a lot about distance learning, the possible future of education. And there may be some things within that that we want to keep as we go into the future. And our panel today are 6 fantastic experts who will each be able to share their perspectives on these big questions about what the education of the future might look like and what the past year has taught us. So we're going to do some introductions in a second, but this will take the form of a conversation amongst all of us about these things. We're going to touch on what students should be learning and how they best learn, the role that parents and families might play and the information that they need, and what the institutions of the future might look like, schools and universities. And to get started, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly and tell us each one thing that they've learned or one insight that they've gained about distance learning in the past year. And I'm going to start with Yulia.
Здравствуйте.
Hello, my name is Yulia Cherepanova. I'm head of the Forbes Education Project. It's a project of Forbes Russian edition, writing about education and the opportunities that Russians have. Going back to the question, I think the biggest eye-opener of the year was that the distance format can really work, in spite of the fact that many parents survived this period with a lot of problems. Nevertheless, the experience has shown that if you do go that way, if you find ways, then it's quite easy and in many ways more effective to pass knowledge online, sometimes better than offline.
Thank you, Yulia. We'll pick up on some of those themes in our discussion. Annika.
Hello, everyone. Hello from sunny Israel. I'm Annika Brain. First of all, I'm a mom of 2, and then I'm co-founder of 3 edtech startups, online language schools, and I've been launching and testing innovative educational technologies for 14 years, but this year and last year, they were quite eye-opening for me, not only as for professional and educator, but also as a parent, because my initial thought was, oh my God, would it work for everyone? Would it work for a state level? Yeah, and I was pleasantly surprised it worked. And I'm surprised how myself and other educators and schools and governments would be able to adapt this seemingly difficult situation. So I could imagine the power of distance learning, but I wouldn't imagine how powerful it could be and how many opportunities it opens for all the countries. And wow, that's amazing.
Thanks, Annika. Mihaela.
I'm Mihaela. I'm a physics teacher in rural areas of Romania. I'm a Teach for Romania alumna, and I've learned this during this past year that we can really improve the education that we give to those children in very poor and remote communities by using distance learning. We used a lot of virtual laboratories. We had lots of guests like scientists that could never dream to invite in our physical classroom. So that really gave kids much more interest and made education more fun for them.
Thanks, Mihaela. Roman.
Здравствуйте, дорогие слушатели. Меня зовут Роман
Hello,
Котов.
dear attendees. My name is Roman Kotov. I'm head of the Gorchak Lyceum under Moscow State Foreign Relations Institute, and also co-founder of one of the private organizations in Russia, which deals with quite a lot of students who don't go to school every day. So for us, this year, in spite of all the hardships, turned out to be the year where the future suddenly happens today rather than tomorrow. And maybe in that future, not everything proved to be so as romantic as we had thought, setting up online platforms and online schools. But nevertheless, we felt that the way we were thinking about the school of the future was exactly the way we came to experience. So this feeling of having the future in the current day was perhaps the biggest experience of the past year.
Thanks, Roman. Pharaoh.
Hi, thank you. So my name is Vero. I am the Chancellor and Rector of Universitas Mahakarya Asia in Indonesia, Asia. We are a new university. Today is actually 1 year of our establishment, which is very great. So one thing about distance learning is all about is equality. Previously, if you want to become a world-class university, deliver services to many people, you have to have a very luxurious building, facility, and everything. But pandemic give us a reality that everything is still the same. From the best university in the world until the worst, they are looking at the same thing, which is Zoom, Google Hangout, and so on. So it means that what differentiates a good university and a not so good university is who teach and what's being taught. So one word, that distance learning is actually a way to make high quality education equal for everybody, especially in Indonesia, where we have a 17,000 island. This is very, very good solution, and this discussion will be very, very good for us to dig down more on that.
Thanks, Pharaoh. That's a lot of islands. Tatiana.
Здравствуйте.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Smirnova. I represent the organization SOS Kids Villages in Russia. The purpose of our organization is to make sure that every kid that found themselves without parents to have a family. So we actually arrange for familial support to children and also do social orphanage support. So we work in 6 regions of Russia where these kids' villages are located, each family being a set of houses, each of which hosts a foster family with parents and 6 to 8 kids of different age. And even though our session is called distance learning, well, I would like to start with saying that we didn't like the advent of this era. It involved a lot of workload on parents. They had to provide support to their kids going to different schools, different years. There were lots of problems in terms of equipment, network access quality. So we had to deal with that somehow. But once all the processes were formed, it turned out that not everything was as scary as we had thought. It turned out that online could cover both, school education, extracurricular activities. We even had a choir online. And answering question of what we've learned over this year, I would put it this way. We got rid of the stereotype that online is education that's not good quality. We understood in many cases that online offers great opportunities for development.
Thank you so much, everybody. And just to introduce myself, I'm Alex Beard, and I run a research lab looking at the future of education and work in many countries around the world, and have been fortunate to study lots of practices in distance learning and technology in education, among other things. And so I'm really excited that we'll have a chance to speak a bit more together on some of these topics. Lots of themes have come up there already, from the power of distance learning, the way that the past year has changed attitudes and practices, some of the challenges in distance learning and some of the barriers to it being adopted as well. And we're going to explore all of those topics as a group in the next 45 minutes or so. So the first big question that I'd like to bring to the group is around how we learn, how students learn. What has the past year taught us about the role that online learning might play in student learning? What's it taught us about what students should be learning today? And what's it taught us about the formats that are most effective, learning at home, learning online, learning in schools? I wonder if anybody would like to just comment, first of all, on the overall trends. What have we learned about how students learn? Julia.
I believe that, on the whole, education is quite a sophisticated system, and I think it should be split in two components. The first one is academic, that's transferring knowledge, and the second one is social, it's about communication. So over the past year, we talked to a lot of people who went through different programs, parents with kids, and MBA students for adults, and everybody agreed that in terms of information transfer, distance learning worked very well. So in terms of passing the formal knowledge, everything was fine. The biggest challenge and problem everybody had was the one with networking or social interactions. And I think that when talking about school education for kids, it is still a big question. And it is the problem that we need to deal with and find a solution to.
Thanks, Julia. Ferry, you wanted to comment on that one too.
Thank you, Alex. The first one, I will start with the highlight or the good thing. The good thing is it's very easy for us to get the best lecturer, the best professor from anywhere. That's the first one. The second one is it's very lowering down our cost of operations. So we save around almost 60%, 70% of our normal operating costs, which is very, very great. And for a new university like us, that is very, very helpful for our operations. But the low light is, number one, is attention span. Studying online is very, very challenging, especially when you are looking at the screen for 1 or 2 hours. So the strategy for that is actually to split the studying hours, not into 2 hours straight, but maybe 30 minutes break, 30 minutes break, and so on. And the next one is, another low light is the connectivity. Some of the country is not having a good connectivity. For example, Indonesia. I mentioned that we have 17,000 islands and not all the islands have good connectivity. So if the students are joining from a rural area, which we have a campuses in rural area, it's very challenging. So distance learning requires a very stable connection, and a lot of university and students sometimes cannot afford that. But of course, there are always a way for them to find out internet cafe and so on. Even that, sometimes the connection is also not good. So the challenge, number one challenge for distance learning is connectivity. But if we have connectivity figured out, and if we have methodology figured out, distance learning can be a very good way to make education equal for everybody.
Thanks, Ferry. Annika, I wanted to come to you on this question and just ask, how do we think about the motivation question in online learning? Because we know it's motivating to be with a teacher, to be with peers. So how do we think about motivation when it's just us and an online learning exercise?
Oh, Alex, I could talk hours and hours about that because I've been studying about motivation about 10 years and more, because motivation is the foundation of our educational strategy. And my experience gave me some answers. In my projects, we start with observation, getting known the student, answering the easiest and at the same time hardest questions in our life. Who are you? And what are you interested in the life? What are your fears and faiths? What are your advantages and disadvantages? What are your aims and goals? And do you really have enough energy and resources I'm sorry, to proceed your goals? And when you made this analysis, this basic and very important analysis of your student, you release the energy of your student and you unpack and support his natural discovering and natural learning interest. And then you can use it. And I have my personal history here, my personal story. My son, he's 8 years old, and he has a slight form of ADHD. It's a like attention disorder, and so he cannot concentrate. He cannot concentrate more than few minutes. And can you imagine him in Zoom sitting with his class in the state school? No, you cannot, because it's not so effective for him. So I'd love to thank Israeli public schools for not being punished and not being pushing my son and my family, and let us to create the personal strategy for his development and the personal strategy for his studies here. Because Israeli people and Israeli government, they are quite they have a lot of respect to personal limits and to personal traits of the character and physical statements of the kids. That's a lot that really is very important. It's crucial for learning, I think so. And so my son, for now, he's studying coding, he's studying math and English through his favorite games, Minecraft and Roblox, with private students and private tutors, and he does surfing and swimming. That's his personal strategy. And I unpacked his natural motivation here. So that's my experience.
Thanks, Annika. So it seems like we're beginning to outline some of what online learning and distance learning are really good for. Differentiation, for making progress, for reaching places that would be hard to reach otherwise, for driving down costs, for developing new practices, for motivating some students. Tatiana, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you've learned about what's worked for students and what's been hard for them, their preferences in distance learning in the past year? Can I ask that question to you, Tatiana? Sorry.
Of course, Alex. During the online period, it became obvious what had been mentioned a lot in the past. The school is not just an educational institution. Kids go to schools for communication. It's there that they hone their social and communicative skills. When they say they missing school, it means that they're missing face-to-face communication. As I said, there were some technical hurdles that we had to overcome in the beginning of the online period, but when the kids coped with them, it suddenly became obvious that they're coping with getting knowledge from online as well, or even better than offline. Online allowed us to have new opportunities with extracurricular activities. All sorts of classes, internships were organized where kids from different regions took part. Had these internships and classes be organized offline, that would hardly be possible. A lot of support was offered by volunteers. One other area gained momentum, individual online tutorship. It's when a corporate volunteer works one-on-one with some young person, answering their questions, whether it's about choosing a learning path, or maybe some career growth question, or maybe just, coaching them for an interview. This all started to develop actively during the pandemic, and we took active part in that. And that was and remains important even currently. Although some time has passed, and we saw that kids got kind of tired of only having to do online. So the motivation population starting to drop. Luckily, by that moment, the restrictions were removed. The kids got back to schools, to colleges, to kindergartens. And what I'd like to say, when we were asking our kids about their feelings about distance learning, what they liked, what they didn't like, how they see the future process of education, everybody is unanimous as saying that they want to get general education at school, within the walls. As to extracurricular, additional activities, they would like to get them online, because online really opens up borders, because it does require a lot of resources. And for them, it has already become comfortable to work there. Thank you.
Thanks, Tatiana. I'm going to come back to that question in a second about the role that distance learning might play in the future. But first, Mihaela, I wanted to ask you, in your experience as a teacher in the past year, what have you seen as some of the benefits of distance learning for your students, perhaps in terms of broadening their horizons?
Well, working in rural areas where we do not have access to many experts to bring people who are really involved in research in, I teach science, and science is developing so fast now. It's not about only using the handbooks or whatever it is in our curriculum now. It's about letting the students understand what science means today in this world. And we managed to invite a lot of people who are experts at, like European Space Agency, and we discussed with the Romanian scientist who works for the Mars rover, and he explained to our children what are they doing there, or a lot of other things like what in artificial intelligence is, what's the future of autonomous cars, or things like that a kid in a rural area maybe cannot even imagine. So we had access to all these kind of experts and people who were so eager to share with the kids, with the secondary school kids, their work. And we talk a lot about the climate change and the future of us as people on this planet and how we should protect it. It was a big moment for awareness raising. Where are we going? And a bit of a hint on the jobs of the future for which those children should prepare. And it was very nice. At the beginning of this period, everybody was so disappointed because I was doing a lot of things like teaching in the nature and going, on field trips, and we all had to replace everything with something else. And I said, okay, we cannot go to the trips, the local trips. So let's go on Mars, or let's go and learn about something about the International Space Station or something like that. And it really has helped us broaden the perspectives and the knowledge that we were able to bring to the class. And that was a big resource that we can use, and a big moment where we could open up the knowledge for those communities.
And so my last question on this topic, thanks Mihaela, is for anybody in the group really. So this situation has been forced on us, this experiment. Are there elements of it? Is distance learning going to become a permanent and core feature of education in the future? Or will it be an addition that helps to enhance education? What role will it play in learning in the future? Ferro? And then I'll come to you, Yulia.
I think some part of it will stay, some part of it will maybe fade away. Education in a distance learning will stay for those subjects or lessons that are not very, practical heavy. So subjects like maybe economics, accounting, management, I think it will stay with the distance learning. But subjects like, let's say, science or vocational, I think they will go back to the school after the maybe vaccination or COVID gone away, because for let's say architecture, sometimes they have to create something by hand in a team and in a group and in a real world. So I think depends on the scenario, for the lessons that are not very practical heavy, it will, it will stay online. But for the lessons that are very, practical heavy, it will go back to the school and to the workshops.
Julia?
Да, я согласна с Фера.
I totally agree with the previous speaker, with Pharaoh. It's very unlikely that any one of us would like to be treated by a surgeon who learned his skills online. There are some subjects we cannot be taught online, and I'm not sure that schools may go online. Schools is much more than just getting knowledge or skills. This is about communication. It gives an opportunity to children to work in a team, to live in a team. It sets some stereotypes for life. And we're not sure whether these things can be passed over online. The live communication is something which will stay. We're all human beings, we're all social beasts, and communication is very important. I do think that year after the pandemic, we're happy to be back to the office. So although a year ago many people dreamt of not having to go to offices every day, and online gave us a lot of benefits. Once we tried new methods in instruction, many teachers came with the conclusion that they can still do that offline because it enriches their whole instruction process. Even when we are all back to schools, some things, some elements will stay with us. But I do not believe that eventually people will just leave online and study online.
Annika?
Yeah, I'm not really agree with it. I think it's just a question of time. Yeah, sure, for now the technologies are not ready to make the same like involvement and the presence effect, right? But can you imagine in like 20 or 30 years where technology raised up like virtual reality and augmented reality, when you can imagine your doctor making operation on the virtual body, yeah, using the very innovative technologies with just virtual augmented reality with holograms and so on. We cannot imagine how developed with technologies the world will be in 20 or 30 years. I don't think it's a question of the time.
Вопрос просто, а зачем?
Well, the only question which remains is why, what for? Probably there will be some technologies which will separate us all. But why? Why we need that? We are not going to live amid the pandemic all the time.
The question of equality, the Pharaoh said, we can provide this high quality education level for everyone. In a small village of an Indonesian or for Moscow, for New York, the kids could be equal here.
Let's dig into that. So I think one of the things that we have seen, I'm going to come to you, Roman, for this one, and you can perhaps share the point that you have to make now, but it's a complex field, this field of distance learning. It's new. It seems to work differently for different students and works better in different places and for different purposes, for motivation, for social learning, for practical learning, for academic learning. So Roman, how do kids and parents make sense of this all? How do you have a sense of what's a good version of distance learning, or what's a good school that's doing distance learning well? What's the criteria that we should be considering to understand that? Should we listen to the children? Should parents be telling us? What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you so much for your question. Thank you so much for your question. Let me comment on what's been said before, just to make a bridge to this my experience. I think that this experience, which we all lived through, including the distance learning, which was forced on us, it showed that in future the school as a building probably will lose its sense, would lose its point. The key takeaway for me regarding the future of the school is connected to what we called a distributed school notion. When this education model would emerge, and it doesn't imply having a building or an edifice, if you want, at all. Although I cannot agree with all the previous speakers, but the way the knowledge is transferred and the social function is not performed in an online mode, and the students would like to get back to schools because they want to communicate to one another, and this is how the school performs its social function and would still exist in future. I don't think that this would be like that in future. Let's imagine a school student who is playing hockey, for instance. He is a member of some hockey team, so if he does well in this hockey team, he would have lots of friends who he would be playing hockey with, and by any means he would like to go to school in order to communicate to his peers, to his mates probably. He would feel better within that hockey team. All his friends would be there, and that means that we'll have alternatives to these children communities in which the social function would be performed, and this is not a school. The fact that we cannot perform that social function outside the school means that just the moment is not opportune, the time is not ripe. But for me, it's obvious that a school as a place where you come in order to have party or to communicate to people, it will change as well. And most likely, I think, we'll have some distributed places where this social function, which seemingly is not performed, will be performed. This becomes even more obvious for me in case of universities, although we are speaking about school education today. And for instance, we see that by the example of more than 6,000 students who are being instructed outside of school as a building. Today, we are concerned how to streamline that process, not just to ensure the academic achievements, but also in terms of social functions which a school should perform, providing for necessary communication, for transferring the cultural code of the society in which the students live, how the upbringing goes on, what role is played by the family. I think that unlike the previous model of knowledge transferring, this is something we have to think about. These questions are put in front of us today by the families, by the children, by our responsibility in front of our children. And we have to discuss these very questions in the foreseeable future, regardless of whether the pandemic would go on or would be defeated once and forever. In case we speak not about the in-person school, the school you have to go to every day. The choice of such a school would depend on certain criteria. Certainly, every school should have an online platform. If a school claims to be an online one, it should have some platform. And this platform should be high quality. This platform should incorporate some content which meets all the curriculum requirements, and at the same time, it should have some tests and exams, evaluation platform, so to say, in order to understand the performance, the achievements of the students. But in the framework of the individual educational trajectory chosen by this or that student. Two other criteria of a more bureaucratic or official or technical nature is availability of the license. A school should be licensed to act as an online platform, and there should be a state accreditation, because upon finishing a school, a student, a graduate, has to be able to go to a university, and therefore we have to have a state certificate for that. In case of Russia, only accredited or certified or licensed school may give such a certificate. Therefore, there would be some formal requirements as well. So it should be an online platform with a license or accreditation. So these are the most important criteria for the parents and children who make their choice, the ones who are opting for online school. That's in brief what I may tell you.
Thanks, Roman, for that comprehensive answer. So, Yulia, I know you've also done research into a similar topic through Forbes. Would you tell us some of what you learned in your research devoted to private schools? What were the key things that parents should be looking for, or the key qualities to complement what Roman has shared?
Да, но я сейчас буду очень сильно спорить с Романом.
Well, I will probably argue against what Roman has said, because I totally disagree with the three pillars which he mentioned as the most important criteria when choosing a school. I think that I will have to put that into some context. In autumn, we actually made a rating of the best private schools of Moscow, and our rating was limited, meaning that we did not consider all the Moscow schools, only ones which were accredited, the way Roman put that. Private schools in Moscow can be divided into three types. So the ones which are accredited, meaning that they can actually, they're entitled to arrange uniform exams. There are schools with a license, extracurricular license, which in essence provide for the mainstream education. So that seems to be a red tape problem, but actually the schools which don't have accreditation usually would find some partners from among the educational centers with public accreditation, and the children would take exam there in the partner schools. So it means that you may get the certificate you need even from an online school which has not been accredited. Back to the online platform topic, we know that many schools were not dealing actively with their online education, but amid the pandemic, within 2 or 3 months, managed to develop such platforms, and the online programs are just excellent. Moscow has a number of private schools which are very demanded for, so the competition is very tough. 20-25 contenders per one seat, and they have very good platforms which can be used as extracurricular or as the mainstream education, providing access to the best teachers. As for the conclusions which we came up with and the things which we'd like to ram home to the parents, because they are all important, all the schools are different, and we cannot say that this school is the best. Therefore, actually, we didn't make a rating, but this is just a rendering, meaning that these are 30 best schools. They cannot be rated because they all have different values, and they have all different stance. You have to proceed from your family values, and therefore, actually, you will have to look at how many points school leavers would have. And in that case, for instance, you have to judge by the number of points gained by a child once he goes to such school, when he enters that school. So we have to check the inbound and outbound, input and output. There are families which do not care about the some progress, for instance. They do believe that most important is the values which are being brought there. And the choice of school, actually, whether you are choosing between online or offline, you have to proceed from your family values and proceed from the family values to school values.
Thanks so much, Yulia. Just on the topic of families, I wanted to ask you, Mihaela, you know, as a teacher, how has the past year changed the way that you work with families as somebody who's in school now with the families of your students?
Well, it has really changed a lot, just because those very poor families used to have one phone per family. None of them had even a tablet, and it was very, very difficult to connect. Usually, I used to go and visit them at home. Go to the village and visit each student in my class at home and talk to the parents about education and explain how the kid is doing in school and what support the kid needed. And once the pandemic broke, I couldn't do that anymore. And it was very, very difficult to do that. I'm one of the many teachers in Romania who had to fundraise in order to get some phones or tablets or access to internet for many students in those very poor communities. And once we managed to have each family to have at least one phone, then we could connect somehow, but it could not, we couldn't talk about webinaries and things like that, doing or online classes doing every day, because they had some prepaid access to internet that was not suitable to have an online video conference. So we had to do more individualized education and talking to each family. Sometimes we had families like having 9 or 10 members living in one room, and you cannot have 8 children connecting simultaneously to online teaching in one room. That's impossible. And we had to adjust to this, sending them over some materials and then talking to the parents, trying to find a schedule for each child when the child could have access to the phone and some quietness in the room so he or she could study. It's been difficult, and it's been a different kind of relationship. And, I don't think it's been a bad thing because we had to intensify this communication with the family. There were families that with whom I talked almost every day, because there were many kids in the family facing many difficulties. And I found out some parents who have dropped out school very early in their childhood, and they had no idea what education was about. They couldn't support their children just because they didn't know how to support them. And it's been a lot of parental education. I even went to training for myself on parental education, just to learn how to deal with those families. So I found myself some kind of counselor for those families in order to support the children. And this kind of building relationship and making those families trust you as an educator, even if they don't see you every day or every week in the village, that was difficult, but that worked for us in that community.
Thanks, Mihaela. So it's interesting, distance learning has created new demands of parents, whether it's in selecting institutions, understanding what a great education looks like, supporting children at home, accessing infrastructure that's needed for online learning. And it's that last bit I'd love to pick up on as our final question. So when we think about distance learning and the role that it will play in the future, how is it changing our understanding of the role of teachers and the role of physical or virtual institutions? And Ferro, I wonder if I can come to you first of all there and just ask, when we think about higher education, does higher education need to adapt to a changing world in the long run? And how does it need to do that? And do you think that campuses will still have a role in higher education in the future?
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I think the world is changing very fast. And I think right now we can see a lot of innovation out there. And the way innovation is created is very different with the way academia is designed. Academia designed by looking at the references, reports, and also research. But innovation is not created that way. When, let's say, Travis Kalanick created an Uber, he doesn't go to the library and look at the references. Is there any professor that will say this idea will fly? No, he didn't do that. He just do it. When he succeed, then academia start to talk about that in a seminar, in the conferences. Then they write book about that. And after that, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, it will be taught in a university. 5 years late, right? So means that what we learn in a university is actually obsolete. When they go to the workforce, what they see is very different with what they learn. What's the result is this gap resulting in people not getting absorbed in the workforce. So that's number one problem. And the second one is education in some countries is becoming more and more expensive. So students have go to a student loan. And when they go to student loan, after they work, they have to pay back. And they start to think, why should I go and make a student loan for $150,000? And after that, I have to pay back. Why don't I just go with a vocational program and I can pick and choose whichever courses I want, and then I go to that course and then take that course and completed that course. Now we see that Microsoft and Google doesn't require a bachelor degree even as their requirement. So the role of education is really changing, right? So yes, campus needs to change. One is first they have to work with the expert and innovators, because if not, then they will be left behind 5 years late. But the number of a good innovator and expert are limited. That's why one expert may be teaching in 1 or 2 universities, but not all the university. In Indonesia, there are around 4,500 universities. So imagine that. So if we have one very good expert with the distance learning, he can teach at the same time 4,000 university, 4,000 classes. That is possible, right? So that's number one. The number two is the university have to be ready for modular education. The student have to be able to pick and choose the courses that they want. And that's only able to be done if they are adopting the distance learning model. Because if I want to take the best course, let's say in a coding or a programming in C++, maybe University A is the best for that. Maybe if I take another course, University B is the best for that. It will not be happening if we just focusing on a physical education. We have to deliver that online, take the credit, take the test, and then after that we get the credit for our transcript and our final grade. I think that's how they can adopt. And I think the role of campus will be changing, Alex. And just like Anika said, it's just a matter of time. For now, depends on the subject. I think in the next 1 or 2 years, for subject like economy and then management, it will stay in online because it doesn't require a lot of handwork. But for the subject like a machinery, of course you have to touch the machine, and you cannot touch the machine virtually, right? For now. But I see that virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality is getting more and more advanced. It's just a matter of time until we put on the goggles, put on the glasses, and then suddenly we surfing in a virtual world. I think it's just a matter of time. I see Microsoft is starting to do that. Google is starting to do that. It's just a matter of time. My prediction is 5, 10 years from now, it will be completely different. The question is, how will the campus change? I think the university or campus as a physical facility will change its role from a teaching facility into a social and innovation hub. This is the place where they can go socialize, create things. It's a maker space. They socialize, they build things, they patent things, and then they present the things to investor and so on. That is the role of university in the future. I see it, right? So this is not just a place for them to learn, but this is this place for them to socialize, build things, and create things. That's how I see it.
Thanks, Pharaoh. If that's how we think university might change, what might be some of the changes we might see to schools or to the role of teachers? Mihaela, I wonder if I could just ask you quickly about the role of teachers. What have you learned in the past year about how teaching might change in the long term?
I think we are going to have a more focus on the leadership role of teacher or a mentor. The teacher is a mentor and the leader, not necessarily the person who provides the information. And we've done something to do that at our school now, the school I teach now. We developed a completely new science laboratory. Of course, we have to do the physical education physically in school for the secondary school kids. They're very small. They can They need the social part, and also they need a physical presence in school. But we already have in our rural school, we have the virtual reality, we have the augmented reality in this laboratory, and we also have this laboratory fully equipped to keep this interactivity and the possibility to have at every time of day a special guest, a scientist, a person just working right now in a laboratory in Oxford University or somewhere at the European Space Agency. So I think the future of being a teacher, as I define my job now, is that I'm a mediator and person who supports those kids to find their dream and to find a mentor or to find someone to inspire them for a future career. It's not necessarily me who's doing that, is that we together as the teacher and the children, we have access to all this expertise that is all over the world, not necessarily in our very small rural schools. And I think teachers should open up education for every child like that.
Sounds similar to the idea of the distributed school or the distributed education, where you're accessing teachers in many different locations. So what will the school of the future look like? Who else would like to share a thought on that? Yulia?
Well, I think that is going to be a blended format. One part of it will be online, part offline. It shouldn't necessarily be a school building. The schools can take every shape. It may not be a building. It could be a lesson system, or may not be a lesson. I think lesson-based system is quite obsolete. So the school, just as universities, should offer an opportunity for choice, so depending on what the kid wants. But this being said, the school should provide the required mentor support. And indeed, I agree with Michaela when she's saying that the school will have to focus more on mentorship. Because so our school focus is shifting from putting facts into the kids' heads. They can find them in the internet themselves, but rather to find them and analyze them. So I think this will be the task for the school in the future. And within this scope, the role of the teacher as bearer of knowledge goes away. The role goes to guide the child to look for the knowledge, whereas this pursuit for knowledge will be the kids' work. I think the model is like this.
Annika, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, can you hear me now? I bet it's gonna be something like a mentor with a personal strategy plus peer-to-peer learning. Means if you need some expert, you just find him, and your mentor helps you to find your expert. And so you just take the part of information that you miss in your personal learning puzzle, and then you step to the next one.
Ferry?
I think the education in the future is student don't go to school, but school goes to the student. Means that everything will be here in a device, right? In a goggles, in the VR, in a HoloLens, and that kind of devices. And education in the future will be a personalized education. Means that my needs for the learning might be different with, let's say, Annika's needs for learning. Then let me pick and choose the subject that I want, and let me choose from the wherever I want in whatever medium I want. So I think that's the future, and depends on how long of the horizon are we looking at. But I think if we're looking at 10 years from now, that is my imagination of the school of the future. The school will not be a building, but school will be a device. It will come to you through a platform, through an app, and through any digital delivery.
Roman?
Well, I think that the role of the school as such will not change. It will still be about the transfer of experience and knowledge from one generation to another. But as I would add to the participant discussion, that what kind of knowledge is going to be transferred? We have a curriculum that has been unchanged for dozens or even hundreds of years. But the question is, should we still transfer that kind of knowledge, or this would become irrelevant? The other thing is about what kind of experience to transfer. And the third thing is what methods to use to do that. What new learning cultures emerge, how this knowledge and experience transfer is going to happen after we have found, if we do find some consensus regarding the scope of knowledge that needs to be transferred and the types of experience that are the most relevant for a kid today.
Wonderful. So we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to bring us to the final question of our panel now. So lots has changed in the past year. Lots is continuing to change with distance learning in general. I think the past 10 years have seen us really understand the role that technology might play in education in the long term. So I'm going to go around to each of the panelists in turn and just ask, what's one change which has happened recently in education, in distance learning, that you think we have to keep, we must keep in the education of the future? So short answers, we only have a few minutes, but Yulia, can I ask you first?
I think that, well, in Russian, there's no good translation for the concept of open mind, but I think this is what you need. A more open mindset. You shouldn't fear new technologies. You should know how to use them for your purposes. We don't have a goal of migrating completely to distance learning, but you should be able to freely choose the tools that fit you best. And I think we've been able to try that, and I'd like to keep that for the future.
All right.
I think one change that needs to be kept is mindset change. First, never think that you are a university or school, but think that you are a education technology startup that have a university license, that have a school license. With that mindset, you will always try new ways, whether it's in the delivery of learning or in the delivery of education in other way.
Roman?
Я думаю, это персонификация.
I think it's about personalization, because it's obvious to me that the whole history, the whole story is showing us that we need to migrate from knowledge transfer within a unified system to personalization. I think this is the mainstream for the future.
Tatiana, can I come to you now?
Of course. In this case, I fully agree with Julia. The important thing that we've understood over this period and that we'd like to keep for the future is the open mind. We've got a huge set of new tools, and we must, and we already know, and we should keep that ability in the future to use them to solve our goals.
Thank you. Mihaela?
I think that innovation is the key word for the future. We have to constantly innovate what we are doing in schools or in education. It's always work in progress. You can never say again, this is how we do things, that is a status quo that we are comfortable with. I don't think education will ever be comfortable or, as a complete service. It's always going to change, and we have to innovate and to involve kids in creating those educational experiences, put more focus and more and to empower the children or the students to create learning experiences together with us, with teachers.
Thanks, Mihaela. Annika?
Yeah, I think we just need to be prepared to adapt to any sudden change and just keep exploring and investigating this fascinating world and going forward.
Thank you so much. And so a huge thank you. I think that you all embody those principles of constant learning, innovation, focus on entrepreneurship, imagination, open-mindedness that will be really crucial in the future. So a huge thank you to all of you, to Yulia, Tatiana, Annika, Roman, Ferro, and Mihaela for an education this morning. Thank you so much, and that's it for us.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Annika, Roman, Julia, Tatiana, and Michaela.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.